And as Jesus prayed a long time ago, He prayed, "May your kingdom come, Father. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And one of the ways that can happen is through the concept of wisdom. And so last week we took a look at, I guess, the normal way that we try to move through life and make decisions, and recognize that it is not in line with the way God created us to move through life and make decisions. In fact, our corner verse was in Ephesians 5, verse 15. We'll put it on the screen and I'll read it to you just by way of reminder. God said, "Be careful as you live. Be careful then how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise." And that's the standard He's given us, not because He's mean or strange, but because He's for us. And He recognizes if we would use that as a filter for all the decisions we make, whether they're hard or easy, whether we know what to do and we just are fighting whether we want to do that or should want to do that, whatever the case might be. Instead of asking, should we do it? Is there a law against it? Does mom and dad agree with it? Is it permissible? Is it okay? Is it moral? Don't ask that question when it comes to any decision. It's not a helpful question. It feels careful, but it's actually a very careless question because we're so good at justifying doing what we want to do with that question. However, there is a question, no matter how smart you are in this room or listening, you cannot fight through this. It will eat through every smoke screen you can throw at it. So here's the question we posed last week, a brand new way to filter our decisions. Based on Ephesians 5:15, live as wise, here's our new filter. Number one, based on the experiences God has permitted to happen in your life. This is your past. Based on the circumstances that God is presenting right now. This is your present, your current situation. And based on the dreams that God has provided, the ones He's put inside of you. The ones that completely match with the principles of His Word. Those dreams, your future, based on your past, your present, and your future, then ask the question, what's the wise thing to do? You ask that. If you have the guts to ask that, it's going to save you a lot of regret. It has me. It's a filter that God has lovingly given us in His infinite love that we just marvelously sang about, to protect us from areas or chapters or moments of regret where we say, if I could just go back in time and tell myself, don't do it, or please do it, make a different decision. This question is designed to help us do that, so we don't have those moments or chapters we'd like to erase. We're going to look at one arena of life, because last week we just talked in generalities. Today we're going to look at one arena in life, one category. I'd say the one that has the highest stakes, and that's the moral arena of life. And we're going to look at applying this question to the immoral arena of our lives. This is just as much for me as it is anyone else. So there's really just three things I want to say about this category, and then we'll be done. So here's the first thing I want to say. Destructive moral decisions are always preceded by a group of unwise decisions. So let me say that again in case you have your pens ready. If not, I'd grab one from the pew. This is worth writing down. I don't say a whole lot that is. This is it. You can put them away after this. Destructive moral decisions. Maybe you have never made one. Maybe you haven't. Do you know anybody who's made a destructive moral decision? Maybe you wouldn't go back in time and tell yourself to do something different, but I guarantee you've got a loved one or somebody you care about, you would love to go back in time and tell them to make a different decision. And I want you to know, no matter who it is, no matter what destructive moral decision they made, whatever that was, what came before it was a whole bunch of not immoral decisions, but a whole bunch of unwise ones. Now, I'm going to tell you a fictional story that unfortunately is probably more true than it is fiction. I don't have anyone in mind, but many of you are going to think of somebody as I start telling this story. Now you can put your pens down. Now I want you to listen. This is a story about Gerald and Vera. And the only reason I chose those names because I looked through our roster and couldn't find a Gerald or a Vera in it, so I didn't want anyone to feel like I was talking to them. So I chose Gerald and Vera. So this is a story about Gerald and Vera. They both work for the same company. They're in the same division of their company. There's about 8 people in that division. Now, young people, this is going to be tough because you're a long way from working in a company that has divisions. So let's just pretend Gerald and Vera, for your sake, go to the same school and are working on the same project, a large class project that takes 2 weeks to complete. Okay, so let's just do that. For the rest of us, we're talking about Gerald and Vera. Now, they've been working on a long project, and it's week is here. The deadlines are here. And they've been putting in overtime virtually every night to get this thing done. They met all the deadlines on Friday. They finally got it done. But they don't know how it's going to turn out. They still have to wait the weekend until they get to present it, but they've done all their parts. If you've worked on one of these things, you know if you're ready to celebrate. You're either ready to go to sleep or celebrate, and usually maybe both of them. So the team decides, let's go out and celebrate and go to bed early, but let's go out and celebrate first. And so the team decides to go to this bar. Well, Gerald and Vera have personal convictions about going to a bar. Now, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm just letting you know Gerald and Vera don't feel comfortable doing it. So they don't want to go to the bar with the other rest of the team. So 6 of them take off, and Gerald and Vera are kind of packing up their office. Let me give you a little background, too. Gerald's family is out of town at a wedding. He would have liked to have gone. It's actually his family member, but he had to stay back because he had these deadlines he had to get done. Vera has been recently divorced. So Gerald's in his office getting it ready and goes, man, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home to an empty house. I don't want to go to the bar. You know what? Maybe Vera wouldn't mind having dinner. So he gets out his phone and texts her. This is not a phone, but I'm just pretending. Text her, hey, how about grabbing a bite at Chili's? Nothing wrong with Chili's. You'll eat at Chili's all the time, right? So how about grabbing a bite at Chili's? Vera texts back, sure, that sounds fine. There's nothing wrong with inviting anyone to dinner, is it? I mean, Vera and Gerald have been out of town on business trips countless times and have found themselves eating dinner together a lot of times in the hotel restaurant. This is nothing new. Certainly not wrong. So they go out to eat at Chili's, which is one of the loudest places on the planet if you've ever eaten there. So they're talking and just, about the hardships of the project and then about life. Gerald wonders, you know what? Because he's been struggling in his marriage. He's got 3 kids. They're getting to a stage of life which are pretty demanding, and he and his wife have not been on the same page. And he wonders about asking Vera for her advice. She's been through an experience that everyone knows through. Maybe she could speak into it. So he starts to confide in her about his marriage, which isn't wrong. People confide in people all the time. And she starts to offer back some of the things that she went through. I mean, isn't that what friends do anyway? And trying to help him sidestep some landmines that she was unable to miss. Well, they keep eating and talking, and it's going up and down the conversation, and finds out that Gerald is actually a pretty handy guy, like around the house and such. And when Vera got divorced, she had to move into an apartment, and when the movers or the people were coming through to bring her stuff in there, they had to remove one of the interior doors of her apartment because the stuff wouldn't fit through there. Well, they didn't put it back on, so the door is just still hanging there. She's not good at hanging doors. Even if she knew what to do, it's a pretty heavy door. And so she tells him, about her experience, and he suggests in his mind, I could get this door hung up like that. I've done it 10 times. So he says, how about let's just finish and I'll come help hang that door and get it out of your way. There's nothing wrong with hanging a door, right? Don't churches put together programs to go help people do this kind of thing? They've both seen it in their church. There's nothing wrong with this. In fact, I bet if I told the pastor I did this, he'd be pretty proud of me. So after dinner, he goes to the apartment and helps hang the door. It takes 10 minutes. She's elated. She's been in this apartment for weeks with this giant door in the way, and finally it's now fixed. So she gives him a hug to say thanks. It's not wrong to give a hug, is it? No. People give hugs all the time. Shoot, the pastor hugs people constantly after church. It's almost unreligious not to give hugs. You see where I'm going with this? Next morning, when they wake up in the same bedroom, they go, how did we get here? How many wrong decisions did they make before that? How many immoral decisions? How many decisions that broke God's law did they break before that? None. They didn't make any immoral ones. They made a series of unwise ones. And it led to compromise. It led to destruction because they were asking the wrong question as they were making these decisions along the way. Is there a law against this? Is there a law against this? Is it wrong? Is it wrong? Is it wrong? Is it wrong? I'm telling you, it's the absolute worst question to ask. It is zero helpful. It only leads you up to the destruction. And in the category of morality, there's the second thing I want to say. When you cross moral lines, it can have lifelong consequences. Do you know anyone whose lives have been changed by crossing a moral line? Forever? And I'm not saying they're destined to something awful, but morality is a category where the stakes are so high because the destruction here is big and sometimes lasts a lifetime. Now here's the conflict. Here's the problem with that. Morality has the highest stakes, and it's the area we most like to live right up to the edge. Do you know anybody who comes home 20 minutes early from curfew? Unless they ran out of money or ran out of gas or ran out of friends. Nobody comes home 20 minutes early from curfew. How many of you set the cruise control in your car 5 miles an hour under the speed limit? Yeah. Sorry, officers, none of them. Not a one. How many of you got the diet going on for 2019? How many of you, your limit is 100 calories under the diet? I knew somebody who was on a diet, and at the end of the day, at the night, when she looked at her calorie count for the day, if she had enough room, she would go to the cupboard and eat one chocolate chip. Just to get right up to the edge of the diet. And you laugh because you can identify with that. That's how we're wired. There's something inside of every human being that when it comes to the moral arena, boy, we just want to go right up to the edge. And in things like I mentioned, the reason we do that there is because we know there's no scar that's going to happen if we cross over that line. What if this gal I knew ate 2 chocolate chips? Right, nothing. I mean, there's virtually no consequence for that. I mean, if you come home 10 minutes after curfew, you're going to be grounded for a while, maybe, or you're going to get chewed out for a little while. But that's it. There's no lifelong scar. We know the chances. We're weighing the opportunity. It's like it's not really going to kill us or harm us if we go over that much, a little bit. The problem in morality, some of the areas of morality, you cross over, you're done. It changes you. Maybe destroys you. And one of the categories of morality that we have to talk about, because the Bible spends more time talking about it than many other things, is sensuality. That is the arena of morality that has the highest stakes, because the consequences are the biggest. And we know this instinctively just by looking around. We know there are globally destructive consequences in the area of sensuality. Just by perusing through a newspaper and reading about abortion clinics and reading about crisis pregnancy centers and seeing the child trafficking problem that's all over the planet and looking at how many thousands of orphanages exist and need to be created. Why? Because when you cross that line, the consequences are big. Always big. And they last forever. Now, something important God has told us about the area of sensuality. something that's, I don't know if it's not instinctive or we just don't agree with it, is it's not an external issue. We may treat it like it's the same as stealing a candy bar or going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. We treat it that way a lot. But the Bible says, no, no, no. That stuff's like on the outside. The area of sensuality starts deep, deep inside. Jesus says it better than anybody in Matthew 5:28. He says, I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. You see him equating it to what's going on the inside? Look, I can't explain it. I don't know why. I just know this is how it is. God has created humanity in such a way that this area of life, sensuality, is attached to our consciences. It's attached to our emotions. It's attached to our memories in ways that few other things are. You can argue with it all you want, but it's not going to change it. That's how it is. That's how we're created and wired. And so God gives us boundaries for this area of life, not because He's against us, but because He's actually for us. It doesn't want us to go over this line and experience the kind of consequences that we keep imposing on ourselves over and over and over again because we just won't listen. And actually, His boundary is really clear. If this is a clear boundary, if there's a clearer one in Scripture, I don't know what it is. The clearest one in terms of the area of sensuality, in terms of crossing the moral lines in this area, is found in 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18. The verse is longer, but the boundary is 2 words. Flee fornication. That's the King James Version. Flee fornication. In case that's too complicated for you, run. Run away. There you go. Run away. Why? Because God sees what we don't see. We don't believe that something we do on midnight on a Friday night with our girlfriend is going to have a lifelong consequence. He knows that we're not looking at the rest of the world. He knows we haven't paid attention to history in the last 5 seconds. He knows that we're clueless and have 2 or 3 thoughts at most running through our mind right now. So He says, run. Run away. You don't know what you're dealing with. I'm not trying to be mean. My daughter says this all the time. If I give her a boundary, her latest favorite phrase for me is, "You're mean." And no, I'm actually not mean. I actually love you. I'm trying to protect you. I see what you can't see. Not because you're 2 feet shorter than me, but because you're 40 years younger than me. And God is no different. He's saying run away. And Christians read that and go, man, that's so ancient. That's not relevant for today. I mean, maybe back then, fine, but that's just not modern. That's mean. No, it's really not. So here's the last question. How? How do you run away from fornication? Does that mean every person, if you're going to do what God wants to do, if you're going to actually minimize or erase chapters of regret in this area, does that mean you have to join a monastery or a convent? Is that what we're talking about? Because that would do it. I don't think so. So here's the last thing I want to say regarding the area of wisdom as it pertains to morality, specifically in the category of sensuality. Set extreme boundaries. That's what I believe fleeing can mean in a modern world. Figure out where the line of consequence is and step back 10 feet and draw a brand new line. And this is now your new line of consequence. Not this one, not a disease or a new baby, but this line. For instance, when Brooke and I were dating when we were in school, we set a line way back from that one and put it here and decided we weren't going to spend time one-on-one with each other after a certain time of night. Because we saw couples compromise themselves the later it got. The later it gets, the fewer wise decisions are made, especially in this area. We know temptation would be higher, wisdom would be lower. So, I don't even remember the time. It's been too long. But, let's just say it was 11 o'clock at night. So if we found ourselves together at 11:01, I started to panic. Almost like I'm right here at the edge of a disease or something else at 11:01. Even though we may not even be 10 feet next to each other, I'm with her, there's no one else around, it's 11:01, I got to get out of here. And some of you may think, that's just manipulation, isn't it? Just drawing the line further back. You're just tricking yourself. Don't you know you drew the line here? And I would say, yes, you do know that. And again, this is part of God's magic, mystery, I don't get it. He's wired us in such a way that our consciences and emotions attach themselves not to the actual line, but the line we draw. And you know I'm right, because how many of you set your clocks ahead 5, 10, 18 minutes? Some of you, or you know people that do. Why do you do that? Don't you know you set it ahead, so when the alarm goes off, don't you know you actually have 7 more minutes? Yes, but you also know the other reality. You panic when the alarm goes off. I don't know why, I don't know how it works, and I'm not the only one who doesn't know. Psychologists want to know this too, they just can't figure it out. But we don't need to. The reality is, we emotionally connect to the lines we draw. Not the lines that exist, but the lines we draw. So, if there's an area of life, like morality, like sensuality, where the consequences are huge and extreme, why not be extreme in drawing the line? I had another friend who had a real problem with pornography on the computer. And so he drew a line here that said, look, I'm not going to look at a computer alone again. He had a laptop. So, thankfully, he was in a town that had a McDonald's, because they're open all the time. And so if he had to work on the computer, he went to McDonald's. And I remember him telling the story one time. He was at McDonald's working on his laptop, and he didn't get clever at the restaurant where you position yourself where only you can see your screen. Some people like to do that. He made sure that his screen was out where everybody can see it. And he was doing something for his work. He was creating some graph or chart, he said. I don't remember. But anyway, it got to be about 10 o'clock at night at McDonald's, and just for some reason that night, the restaurant was empty. But the workers were there, but they were all back in the kitchen. There was nobody walking out. He couldn't see any customers, and guess what he did? He panicked. Just like if he was about to click on a website he knew he shouldn't, the fact that his line that he drew was being crossed, he panicked, closed his computer, and left. Because he drew it here and said, I never want to get there, so I'll draw the line 10 feet back. Is it wrong to look at a computer by yourself? No. But for him, it was unwise to do it, based on his past experiences, based on his present circumstances, and based on the dreams and the purity that he wanted to have and experience. It was unwise for him to do it. For some of you, it's no different. But it takes a lot of guts to draw the line further back than it is. Because every one of you in here are smart, really smart. And you know, look, I'm just tricking myself. Yes, trick yourself. That's what you're doing. Do it. In the area of morality, do it. Don't live as right or wrong. Live as wise. Which means in the area of this, draw the line further back. If the regret is that high, I've never met anybody who regrets making an extreme boundary. I don't regret the minutes or maybe hours Brooke and I lost dating that we didn't spend after 11 o'clock at night. I have no regret of that time we didn't have. None. I'm just proud that we were able to hold our standards and keep pure before marriage. But it took an extreme standard because I know I'm a ding-a-ling. And she's pretty. It may have been 9 o'clock. I don't know. I know it was extreme. So, what's it worth to you?